Hello uabsferos, my name is Povilas. Today this will be an educational video about the construction processes of dome houses. Sometimes we see expectations like, I bought a dome and now I have it, or I bought it and everything will be taken care of. But the reality is that in the end, the person still has to. Inevitably, the client has to participate at least minimally so that the dome turns out the way they want it, because builders, designers, and other people who are installing and doing everything still need to know what the client needs so that the client feels good and so that it is comfortable and pleasant for them to live in. So today, that's what we'll be talking about, the dome. The issue itself is not a problem. The problem arises when a person does not know the workflow. That is the main thing we are focusing on today. We will emphasize this, lay out all the processes, and arrange the entire sequence so that there is no uncertainty, because that makes the whole process much easier, there is less stress, and you can prepare for everything in advance. You can anticipate what will be done and when it will be done. Even knowing that weather conditions are not always suitable, you can still prepare for everything with a clear sequence of work. Yes, everything starts with the foundation. Here, we are talking about the construction itself, not about bureaucratic matters or obtaining building permits. We are talking about the construction process itself. I have a list right here in front of me so I can explain everything step by step. So the first thing is preparing the site foundation, which means access roads must all be prepared because the machinery will need to get in. People, specialists who will have to do all the work, also need access for material deliveries. You need to make sure that the foundation is prepared first. You could call this an outdoor warehouse, so to speak. Then the fertile soil layer is excavated. Of course, if we're talking about ideal conditions, this is the standard procedure. If we take a standard plot, the fertile soil layer is excavated, geotextile is laid, gravel and crushed stone are poured, all utility outlets are prepared, and then usually a slab foundation is made. The next thing, well, not exactly next, but rather in parallel, is the preparation of the dome component set. In our production, we have a factory where, under controlled conditions, we take the materials and manufacture the dome components. The entire set is prepared exactly as agreed in the contract and as specified in the drawings. And then we transport those components to the site. By that time, the foundation is usually already completed. So it's time to assemble the dome itself, to carry out the dome forming work. After the dome is formed, the arch specialist can immediately start installing the windows and doors so that the dome, the entire shell, is already enclosed. And immediately you can start working on the exterior finishing. We always recommend starting with the exterior finish because if you work on the interior first and it rains, which is very likely, rainwater may leak in and simply ruin the interior finish of the dome house. That's why we always dress the dome from the outside first to make it as safe and dry as possible. Then no matter the weather, you can work on the interior without any issues. So what's next? As for the exterior work, we only do it in suitable weather conditions. We don't do it in winter, and we don't do it when there's a lot of rain, because all of that can wash away the materials, or frozen ice can damage the layers that haven't fully set yet. That's why it's very important to pay attention to the conditions in which the work is being done. So first comes reinforcement, then applying waterproofing from the outside, and finally the finishing layer, the final coating. You can use bitumen shingles, and in fact you should, because all other materials that are not designed to serve as roofing will not function as roofing. So whether we're talking about high-quality decorative plasters or expensive high-quality paints, all of these are still only temporary solutions. Even if the materials are very good, they'll last 3 to 5 years and then wear out, whereas proper roofing will last much longer. Then comes the finishing of the joints. It's important to finish everything properly around the windows and especially around skylights to make sure there's no way for water to get in. And then the interior work begins, which is much simpler because now you don't have to rush, you don't have to keep watching or worrying about the weather. You can even work in winter. There are some important points you need to know. The intermediate stage of the work is not the final result. If, after applying the reinforcement layer on the outside, water leaks in when it rains, that's completely normal. Even after applying waterproofing on top of the reinforcement, it can still happen in some places. Leaks are also completely normal. The waterproofing is not required to protect the entire dome from leaks. We have entirely different goals for the waterproofing. The waterproofing works under the shingles when the relative humidity outside changes. For example, when autumn comes and the humidity increases, but inside we want to maintain a normal microclimate. The waterproofing holds back that moisture from the air. It doesn't simply seep into the structure. That is essentially the main function under the shingles, while the microclimate is maintained by the recuperator, proper ventilation, and also by heat pumps, air to water, and so on. The correct microclimate is created and maintained precisely in these ways. So, returning to the main points, only after the entire system is fully completed do you get the final result. This means that there will be no leaks only when all the layers are present, and you cannot skip a single layer because, again, there are examples of this. When a client applies the exterior coating on the dome and paints it and then calls to say it's leaking, I ask, did you apply the waterproofing? Not everything, they say. That's exactly the problem. Trying to cut corners is a bad idea, and it will end up costing more to fix something. Doing things at the wrong time is also incorrect. Everything needs to be done as instructed. You can check our website, uabsferos.lt, and even download a large document where all the steps are listed in detail, step by step. This is the Dome Construction Manual. That's exactly what it's called, and it's always accessible. You can always take a look at it, but our educational YouTube or Facebook videos are also made specifically to help avoid mistakes and simply to know what the correct sequence of steps is. Weather conditions are really important. For example, if someone applies the reinforcement in the fall and then gets caught by frost. We waited for blisters and cracks to appear and then had to repair them, so it's very important to pay attention to the forecasts. There have been cases when the weather app shows that everything is fine, there won't be any frost, but in the morning you go out and see everything is frozen, and it turns out it was -3 degrees, and of course the reinforcement didn't turn out well. That's why you need to finish everything before the frost, and if that's not possible, it's better to cover everything with plastic sheeting and wait for spring. At that time, you can do unfinished work inside, but the most important thing is not to do the final finishing because it will get damaged anyway. There will be condensation, leaks, something will happen. So inside, under the plastic sheeting, you can work, but not do everything. So it's very important to take weather conditions and seasonality into account. Now, about craftsmen and planning, good craftsmen need to be scheduled in advance. That's really important. It's never the case that when the season starts, and once you decide that it's time to start the work, most likely in 99% of cases, you will encounter the fact that the craftsmen have work lined up for several months or even half a year ahead, and your project will be pushed aside and they really won't be interested, and then it might seem like there's something wrong with the dome. But in reality, that's just how it is. Good craftsmen always have work. So if you are planning to prepare a dome, you need to plan well in advance. Even when the foundation is being laid, you can already start discussing interior finishing work with the craftsmen. Planning the delivery of materials might seem silly, there aren't even foundations yet and you're already talking about finishing work. But that's actually how it is. If we want to carry out all the work in a consistent manner, we need to plan well in advance because everything is scheduled this way. Rushing in construction often causes more problems than benefits. It might seem like if we hurry, everything will be fine, we'll get it done faster, but that's not always the case. You need to allow the layers to set, you need to catch the right timing. You need to consider the weather, you need to have the craftsmen, and you also have to take into account the specifics of the materials because materials from one manufacturer set differently than those from another. And that's also very important to consider. Rushing can simply end up being more expensive. Patience is not a hindrance, but a part of quality. This is something I also want to emphasize and highlight. By not rushing and doing everything step by step, you can really achieve a very good result. Coming back to craftsmen, non-standard projects require more preparation, and that's true. Not every craftsman agrees to take on, build, or install a dome, and that's completely normal. We all have our own narrow specializations. One works as an electrician and can only do wiring in a wooden frame. Another works only in masonry walls, making grooves and installing electrical wiring. Such narrow specializations do exist. And this is completely normal, so it's very important when choosing craftsmen to understand that not everyone will want to take on and build a dome for you. Some people have a flexible mindset, while others want absolutely no experiments in life. They know their own work and do it that way, so this needs to be taken into account when planning and selecting craftsmen. If the client is planning things themselves, you can always reach out to us for a consultation in your chosen city. If we are the ones planning the work, everything is fine, we handle that ourselves, but what's very important are the deadlines when the work will begin. The client's role in the DomeHouse installation process often gives the impression that you can order everything up to the turnkey stage, and You might think you don't have to worry about anything else, especially if, for example, there's a project, a design project. It might seem like that's all there is to it, but if you want things to be done properly, you'll have to pay a bit of attention. It's almost never the case that someone just orders, pays the money, goes on vacation, and comes back to find everything finished. There are always some questions or changes that come up, and that's very important. As a client, you definitely don't have to be a builder yourself, and you shouldn't be. Maybe it's even unhealthy, because each of us knows the nuances of our own field. And if, as imperfect non-professionals, we go and try to explain to everyone how things should be done correctly, we'll probably end up causing more interference than actually achieving a good result. You need to be a conscious participant in the process, to give everyone their work, to do what they came for according to the drawings and plans. And each master or specialist should say what they're missing, where changes are needed, or where suggestions could be made, because everyone's worldview is very different. It's important to remember that a craftsman's experience can improve the installation of your dome house. So this is also a very good resource for making things even better. So knowing all these things, the more we understand the whole process, the less stress there is, and it's extremely important to realize that a dome is best created when a person is involved, not just waiting for a miracle. By understanding all these processes, you can later enjoy the result, which is what we live for. In the end, everything becomes very clear. A dome house is not just a building, it's a journey. It can bring you joy after all. You see how your own grows, right? The dream of a dome house and that journey can be very beautiful if you approach it with understanding and not in a rush, so I wish everyone patience. Dream, plan, write to us. You can reach out through various channels, social networks, and through our website. There are forms and questionnaires you can fill out, and we will see that you want to get in touch. Please, we invite you to visit this dome house, and when we meet, we'll talk, plan, and see what your needs are. Opportunities, and have a wonderful day. See you soon.